Hello and welcome to the special on-location edition of Youth in Politics. I'm your host, Justin Schneck, here at the National Weather Service in Gray, Maine. We're going to take an inside look at what they do here with an interview with senior meteorologist John Cannon. Take a look. How did you get involved with meteorology? What inspired you into that field?
Most meteorologists, when they're kids, when they're about 8, 10 years old, they turn into little weather nuts, and I think I'm not the exception. Most of the guys, when you talk to them here, it's the same thing. You just get involved in big storms and you enjoy them, and it's a passion that a lot of people have. You'll find that very common.
Did you have an icon or an idol that you looked up to in that field?
I did, but it was so long ago. They were from Channel 6 out of Bangor, and Channel 13 in Portland, years and years ago, and you wouldn't know them. So they're not around anymore.
What are some of the daily activities that you do as a senior meteorologist here?
A little of everything. We do a lot of storm analysis for severe weather. Winter storms is really our bread and butter. Hydrology, we have a senior hydrologist. We watch river flows and forecast for floods. Ocean storms, a little bit of everything. Research, we do some research, climatology, you name it. We're here 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. On weekends, when you're home at Christmas, we're here, and so there's a lot of different things that happen over the year.
Do they keep you on your toes?
No, they definitely do not that, no.
So is the weather in Maine unique compared to other states?
It's funny you ask that, because I went to college, I went to Oswego State, and that's in upstate New York, and I learned a lot of neat things there, and when I came to Maine, everything's backwards. A lot of the weather here moves from east to west, like it is today, with our offshore storm backing in. And it's a very unique, interesting place to work. A lot of things you learn in school, you have to adapt it a little bit for Maine. To make a forecast, there's 3 things you need. You need observational data, which means weather observations, the jet port information, the hourly weather you're getting, or radar or satellite photography. This is an example of radar. That's an example of infrared satellite photography. And when we get all this information, plus the information from the weather balloon we send up twice a day, which is really critical for what we do. And this is the essence of what we do, because we need to start with a really nice initial data set. We can run computer models, which is what's on this middle screen. And what this does is gives us layers of the atmosphere with time, and we can try to forecast out through 7 days what's going to be happening in New England. Once we have these models, we actually get to manipulate model data, pure model data on this screen, and we create digital forecasts. Once we create digital forecasts from these graphics, you can create text products and graphics on the web for people to view and see, which is what we do in 20 seconds or less.
Let's talk about some of those weather patterns, if you will. Nor'easters.
Right.
For somebody watching this program who is not familiar with the term, what is a nor'easter?
Right. Well, in the wintertime and in some years in the middle of June, you can have a high pressure sitting over the Canadian Maritimes to our north and a low pressure coming up the coast. When you get those 2 weather systems together, you get a northeast wind funneling down the coast, often very violently, very quickly, fast-moving air. In the winter, it produces snowstorms. At any point of the year, it can produce large waves, coastal flooding, beach erosion, and that type of phenomenon. Pretty interesting type of storm.
Is it like a hurricane?
You know, it's different than a hurricane, and it doesn't get the attention that hurricanes do, but it should in the Northeast. People die each year. We have a marine program here, and we have mariners that go out there and get caught in these. You can have 80, 90 knot winds inside of a nor'easter, 80 mile an hour winds, and it doesn't get the attention necessarily that hurricanes do. They don't get names, but they can be very serious storms, especially to the mariners. And we issue storm warnings once in a while, which is for hurricane force winds over our coastal waters.
Is there a particular season for nor'easters?
Usually it's in the winter. The warm Gulf Stream coming up the coast really likes to interact with that cold Canadian high I was telling you about in the Maritimes, and it really likes to spin up these big storms and back in the moisture and dump the snow on us. But in recent years, we've had nor'easters all the way into June. It's very rare, very highly anomalous, and very strange, and we're not exactly sure why they're happening so late, but they are. That's the current radar. That's the perfect example of a system. We had a late season summertime nor'easter come up the coast with almost spiral band looking areas of rain coming in from the Canadian Maritimes and the Atlantic. And the northeast winds over the last couple of days have really pushed water levels high along the Maine coast and also down into New Hampshire. And that combined with waves produced coastal flooding, minor coastal flooding over the last couple of days. But you can see the bands of rain coming in from the east, which is pretty unique to this area.
During the hurricane season, is it possible for a hurricane to hit Maine?
It is. It's very, very, very rare. And hurricanes usually do not have storm surges like nor'easters do up in these part of the woods. Only one has done that in history. We usually get the remnants of hurricanes. We have a nice buffer called Cape Cod and Long Island that really buffer us from getting the full effects of hurricanes. Plus we have very cold water in the Gulf of Maine all year round, as you know. And hurricanes like 80-degree water, we haven't seen that in a while, so not a direct hit in a long time. Hurricane Bob in 1991 would probably be the last real hurricane to brush our area, and Hurricane Gloria in '85 before that.
Speaking of storm surge, coastal flooding is a big problem in Maine. We're seeing it locally here. And beach erosion also goes along with that. One example that I can think of is Camp Ellis in Saco. We see with a Patriots Day storm where houses went right into the water. There are streets that are no longer there today because of that. What do you feel needs to be done in the future in trying to prevent these sorts of things from happening in terms of beach erosion and coastal flooding?
Some of the things the community of Saco is already taking into effect, and they're building barriers and helping to build up the dunes, which is the ecology part of it, that they'll help themselves with that. But there is the oceanography side and the geology side and the meteorology side. When you get sand moving, when you get waves and wind and waves interacting together, we're finding more and more that the high tides, these big astronomical tides, need to be combined with the big waves to create the real damage. It's one thing to get coastal flooding and have the water come up and come down to create a little inundation of low-lying areas, but it's the splash over, the combination of big waves with those high water events that really cause a lot of damage. And the community of Saco, the beaches tend to face to the northeast. In the northeaster, that's where the wind and waves come from. They really get enhanced damage down there. So we're really trying to research and better understand how wind and waves and tides and the Maine Geological Survey, the people who study erosion of dunes, we're trying to get them together with us, and also the hydrologists. When you get a lot of freshwater flooding, when you have an incoming tide, the estuaries tend to really fill up, and you get really high magnitude events in small areas.
Other than the community of Saco, are there other areas in Maine that are more prone to coastal flooding than others?
There are. It's definitely from Portland and the beaches point south, just because the way the coast is oriented for nor'easters. But there are some high-profile beaches: Gooch's Beach, Mother's Beach, Kennebunk Beach, Rye Beach in New Hampshire. Those type of sandy, moving areas where people have built up right next to the beachheads. It's part of man-made problem as well, not just meteorology and so on. But York County really has it tough, so does Rockingham County in New Hampshire.
And what should people do to find out more information if their area is in more of a coastal flooding prone zone? What can they do to find out more information to help protect their home? There
are flood maps available out there, and when you do look for permits for your local towns, I believe most towns, I know Saco does, when you go to pull a permit to build something in a low area, you'll find out pretty quickly if you're in the flood elevation zone, and when you get that permit, it might be a little bit of an issue. So,
well, let's shift focus to the summer months. A lot of tourists come, a lot of Mainers go to the beach, and rip currents are a big problem.
Right.
If a person is in a rip current, what can they do to get out safely?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that they are a big problem. Part of the problem with rip currents is not only the weather and the waves, but also the temperature at the beaches. If it's a very warm day, people will be more exposed because they'll be in the water, and they'll be in the water late in the day. Lifeguards may be gone. So that's one problem that's not meteorology related at all. The second problem is with riptides, you get when you get large swells, when you get high energy waves reaching the beaches, sometimes the sand underneath is configured so it makes a current that makes a rapidly moving current that goes out to sea. And it's not a big problem if you're in ankle-deep water, but when you start swimming and you get in waist-deep water, you'd be surprised how fast and how energetic that water is that'll take you out to sea. If you're ever in a rip current, what you should do is definitely not try to fight the water that's pulling you out to sea. Don't try to swim directly to shore. Swim parallel to shore and then go in. That's really the only way to get out of one of those.